How can O&M as a profession be more revered by not only our peers, but also by the government? And how can we show that what we are doing actually works and that we, the comms, the O&M specialists, are the ones that need to be the ones doing the training? That's exactly what Joe Nemargut, who's an assistant professor at the University of Montreal, asked himself. And we are going to have him plus his research partner on the podcast today. You definitely don't want to miss it if you're really interested in how we're using research to solidify our profession and put us on the map figuratively. I wish it were literally, though. Hi, I'm Cassie Maloney. I'm an orientation and mobility specialist and the founder of this incredible organization. On today's episode of A Step Forward, I sit down with Joe Nemargut, who's an assistant professor at the University of Montreal, and his research partner, Yingzi Xiong, who works for Johns Hopkins University. And we sit down and we chat about the research that they are doing to help move the profession of orientation and mobility forward, so that way we can prove that what we are doing actually works and we need to be the ones doing it. If you're attending the O&M Symposium, well, you are in luck, my friend, because Joe and Yingzi are doing a bonus presentation. It's all up in the portal for you already. If you don't know what the O&M Symposium is, we do have a link below. And as always, we have a link to what they are talking about as well. So if you want to get involved in their studies, definitely check out the link below as well. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you right now. Hey, you guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Joe Nemargut and, oh my gosh, I'm going to say your name wrong again. Yingzi Xiong.
No, I'm good. No, it's
Yay! Good. Here with us today. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves to our community before we even begin?
Yeah, so I'm Joe Nemargut. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Montreal and specifically doing orientation mobility. And I have different projects that some of you may already know about assistive technology or orientation skills, and looking also at service delivery in O&M.
Hello, my name is Yingzi Xiong, and I'm an assistant professor at the Lions Low Vision Research and Rehabilitation Center at Johns Hopkins University. So I lead a lab that does research on low vision related topics, broadly defined. And a common theme of those studies is independent travel. So we are looking at how, if you also have a hearing impairment, how vision and hearing impairment together may affect your independent travel. We look at how to improve the accessibility environments to help people who are blind or visually impaired navigate better. And then this exciting project Joe and I have been working on is trying to really tap into, for me, it's like a little bit deviating from my lane, really looking into how can research be helpful for O&M practice. Yeah, very happy to be here.
That's absolutely incredible. So, Joe, we know a little bit about your backstory. Can we focus on your colleague here? Because I'm just a little curious how you even got into that part of the field and what drew you to working with Joe in the first place.
Oh, I love that question because I love telling stories. So I actually have a training background. When I was doing my PhD, my background was more in, more basic vision and hearing sciences. So we were studying how people learn to have better visual skills or better hearing skills. And then after I got my degree, I was really drawn into the low vision world because I feel like we can always train a person with normal vision, normal hearing to do better. But it's really so meaningful if we can have a person with impaired vision or impaired hearing function better in their everyday life. And so that got me started in my postdoc, and I started doing research on low vision. And that's when I started to learn about, O&M and like occupational therapy. And O&M in particular is really fascinating for me because I feel like O&M specialists have to know everything about a human being, because a person can have problem with travel due to like many different reasons. And you have to be so smart and so creative to really address their problem. So once I was telling my mentors I wanted to be an O&M specialist, I told Joe too, I'm still wanting to have that one day. But then I was convinced that, and now I really learn, by combining what the research I'm doing and work with professionals like Joe, I see where I am. Maybe later in the stage of my life, I can become an O&M, but now I've realized, it's valuable if I work with clinicians and patients closely.
And O&M in and of itself, it's so beautiful that you are seeing how incredible this profession is. Like, it's so cool. And every day is so different. And we have to, you were right, know so much about that student to peel it apart. Is the issue autism? Is it a hearing impairment that we don't know about? Is something happening at home, or is it my teaching? Like, sometimes we don't know. And I think that's one thing that I'm looking forward to in your guys' research. Can you give us a quick synopsis of the study that you guys are doing and how it's going?
All right, so I'll just kind of go briefly and kind of also how we got started in this project, because as Yingzi just mentioned, our kind of, it's a great collaboration. We've been working for years now on different collaborations, but this specifically, one of the things I think it's important in O&M is the recognition of the profession and what we do. So we're a small field, right? We're a small but mighty bunch. And I think a lot of other professionals don't really know we exist and don't understand what we do. So that leads a certain level of vulnerability, I think, to the profession, right? We've seen it out there, the discussion. I don't want to get into the debate about with OTs or with other professionals, but I think everybody understands that what we do is valuable. But one of the issues is, unfortunate issues, is we have to prove these things to the government, right? We have to show to the government what we're doing is valuable. So we have to find ways through research or through other means to demonstrate what we do is effective. So, for instance, we know if we talk to, the students who we're working with to say, okay, Cassie or somebody helped me out so much to do these things. But how do we then show that to, somebody to invest in O&Ms and have the government pay for that service, right? So that's kind of, I think, where we get started with this project, because there's a difference between the United States and Canada. In Canada, we have here that all of that service is paid as soon as anybody has a visual diagnosis, then they can receive those services free of charge through the government. In the US, it's, some places that's the case, other places it may not be the case. It's a little bit of a complicated story, and it depends a lot on your age, right? So if the idea behind the whole project is how can we develop a way where the government could understand that this is a necessary service for people with visual impairments, and not just for people that are completely blind, but for people that have some usable vision that have other issues. So that's, I think, where we kind of got started with this. And then one of the populations we are talking about a lot is especially older adults, right? We know that there's a lot of older adults that have vision loss, but they also have other kinds of, maybe mobility issues, maybe arthritis, heart condition, pulmonary condition, all of those things combined to the person. It's not only their vision loss that maybe creates some kind of issue, right, that they're facing. So how can we show that the O&Ms can also help with this population so that they don't have to pay out of pocket to receive those services? And then particularly show, if we can show that O&Ms are the ones helping this, that can also lead credence to that these are the professionals that should be providing the services. So we all know, we say, okay, well, O&M should be providing services for crossing the street or, taking public transportation. Now we're thinking of how can we actually demonstrate that effectiveness to other professionals. So there's a number of different things that can go, that go towards that. But basically, that's where this whole conversation got started. And then we thought of, okay, how can we actually do this and demonstrate something with Yingzi? One of the advantages, he has a great lab down there in Johns Hopkins. Well, down there for me, up there, I guess, for you, Cassie. And that lab can demonstrate that some of these things work in that, environment, right? In that research environment. then the idea is that I go out into the real world environment and they say, okay, well, how can that now be applied with the actual work that O&Ms do? So that's kind of the stage we're at now. And Yingzi has really done a lot of great work already to this stage to kind of demonstrate that these kind of things can be clinically applicable. And then hopefully we can start bringing these out and also get the opinion of other O&Ms of what's needed to really raise the awareness of the profession and show the effectiveness of the types of interventions that we do.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point there, Joe. One thing that I learned this year is that there's a book of jobs for the United States, and we are not on it. And so we have a lot of O&Ms complaining about how we don't have enough orientation mobility specialists. And we also have a lot of orientation and mobility specialists also wanting to go down the route of being able to bill Medicaid and be on the medical model. And all of that is very valid. But we can't get any of that if the government literally doesn't know we exist. And granted, our profession has only really been around since the 1960s, so not even 100 years, right? And especially, during this kind of time. So we're still a baby profession and we do have to prove ourselves. And I think that what you guys are doing is taking that next step, not just for each O&M specialist, because this is going to benefit every single one of us, but for O&M as the field in order to solidify it as something that actually exists. Because you're right, the government needs numbers and needs data. And for me, the older that I get, the more I'm like, okay, give me your research data. Like, I don't just need to know about the in my 20s and in my 30s, I would have been like, keep your white paper, just share with me, the street crossing techniques. And now I'm kind of looking at O&M on a macro level and realizing how important it is that we move the profession forward for all of us. And I love the fact that you are bridging the gap between Canada and America, because we really are struggling here. Our governments work very differently. But if we don't exist to them, then they can't. The other thing that I read into your presentation, your objectives, right, are ways of quantifying O&M services, and also the importance of measuring O&M assessments and interventions. As O&Ms, you guys know very well that, come progress report day, a lot of times we sit down at our computer and are struggling to find our notes because we struggle to take notes during that time. And the trickle down effect in that moment is that we end up trying to remember what the data was instead of it actually being there. And I think your study is going to help us to move how we think about our data and data-driven assessments in the same. And I wanted to give you guys my opinion on that and show my appreciation, because I think that your work will also cover that little hole, even if it's not the primary intended effect.
I think Yingzi, you can speak very well to that about what is the type of data, and also even maybe like the future, how we kind of perceive some of this as far as getting the data, because we want to take the burden off of the center and off of the specialist to make it as automated as possible, so it's easier, so you can concentrate on the time with the students and less time with all the note taking and all of that. So maybe Yingzi can talk about some of our ideas that we have kind of, and some of the things that you've also been developing over there.
Yeah, for sure. And this is going to be like a big story. So I apologize if I'm all over the place. So, starting from like a researcher trying to talk to O&M specialist, one challenge that always make me like tiptoeing is, in research world, we try to keep everything in a system that's easiest to work with in a laboratory context. But O&Ms are so special. Like many other, we have professionals, we work with individual patients. So everybody's different. Even if two people have the same abilities, they have different goals. And that's like mind-blowing for researchers to think, beyond what we usually care about in research context. And another thing really, really challenging for me to get across is the idea, because you work with patient or students in a very dynamic environment. It's very complex. You don't know, you may not be able to predict what the environment will be like. So, but after talking to Joe, we realized these two primary challenges that make me feel hard to connect research and O&M services is actually also what's so important for helping, O&M specialists to quantify the benefits. That's really what goes into the outcome of O&M training. So Joe and I, in our project, and also the presentation we did together, we try to describe steps we're making to quantify people, an individual, and quantify an environment. What is the environment you are working with the patient in, and what's their goal? So, and at the end of the day, we hope by some simple testing of the patient and by knowing what the environment could be, you can have some good estimation of what the patient's performance could be in that environment. And now you can also measure them directly. You can measure again after your rehabilitation. So we want to bring this system into quantifying O&M outcome. And speaking to, you made an interesting comment on how do you record all of these? You'll always be writing as you follow up clients, and you can't have every single detail from the session. So this is very interesting, kind of just come up naturally in our study, during my study, because of the smart glasses nowadays are getting so popular. Just by chance, we realized, why don't we use smart glasses to record as much as we can? Record the participant, the students' reaction, record what's the scene in there. Now, when we have the system ready, all the predictions we are making, you have the scenes captured. So you can hopefully, combined with the scale Joe and I are making, you can automate some of this note taking and quantify what's the people's performance before and after rehabilitation. So some of these are starting from historical struggle I had, and then with Joe's help and insights, we finally are trying to really tackle those things. And some are just incidental because technology is advancing and we were open-minded to embrace these technologies. Yeah.
Can I ask, what would that look like? So say I'm an O&M specialist and I'm working with a student and I wear those glasses and I hit record, I take it, then would AI know what I'm looking for? Or do I have to go back and review that? How does that work? Or in your mind, in the future, how will it work?
Joe, would you like to say how you want it to work?
I can mention again, some of this is conceptual, some of this is things that a lot of the measures Yingzi and her lab are already kind of doing, not necessarily with the smart glasses, but the idea is to integrate some of these measures into the smart glasses. So I'll give you an example of some of the things. Well, it all goes off of, I guess, if we look at an environment. So if we're asking somebody, let's just say street crossing, right? An obvious O&M skill, right? So you're asking somebody to cross a street, and that street, it's a stop sign, is a residential street with no traffic, right? And then you're asking somebody to cross another street where there's a street light and it's busy with cars, with pedestrians, So those, even if it's the same distance, right? Even it could be the same intersection, but it's changed, right? So the idea is, how can we basically, you can look at the question as there's no way we can quantify all of that, right? It's too much stuff going on. So what we decided to do is kind of break it all down. So what are the key factors that are important? So for instance, what makes it complicated for somebody? So we can look at, for instance, there's the noise level that's there. There's the noise distractors. There's the lighting. There's the amount of moving objects or people. And all of these things, pointing to what you were just talking about, Cassie, can be quantified with AI, or even not necessarily with AI, just it's things that are built into the phone or the device already that we're not necessarily using. So, the phone knows about the ambient, noise level and that kind of thing. If we have the camera open, there's light meters that are there that can detect. So it's integrating those things and then saying, okay, now we can tell it what's important. What is it that we want? And so rather than noting, I mean, it's extremely complicated to do anyway, how many lux or something like that you're at, is the camera itself could capture that, or it could capture how many decibels outside, or it can capture how many people are passing without you noting, okay, there's 5 people that just crossed in front of them, that the glasses then could do that. And then from that, the idea is it could give you that information, but it could also give you a general sense of that environment, how difficult that environment is. So, like I was talking about, if you're talking about a very, a place that's crowded with a lot of people and it's raining and it's windy, then it can automatically kind of generate that. So, what the idea is, we can take somebody, the same person, not only we see how well they are crossing the street, but we can see, okay, well, maybe it was difficult, like here in Montreal, there's always snow. Well, it was because of the ice and snow was a lot of the problem. It wasn't really to do with their vision so much. It was actually pretty good considering what they had to deal with, right? So right now, I feel like there wasn't a great way other than just writing all that stuff down in your notes, right? And then, like you mentioned, Cassie, well, sometimes I forget, oh, what was it again? I don't know, right? I had too many students that I had to see, and then I'm writing it 2 days later or 3 days later. I don't remember what it was like. And then here it's like, well, it's already kind of recorded that for me. And then I can just basically go back and look at the video, or I can go ahead and look at those, the actual data that's coming across, and then to say, oh, it was like this. That was some of the issue. So if that makes sense, some of these things we can do now, some of these things we have to, and then that's why Yingzi's lab, she has a programmer that's working with her as well, that they can work in actually developing some of these programs.
Now that is cool, because what I'm envisioning, and my limited understanding of AI, but I'll be very honest with you, I like it. I go to ChatGPT a lot and want to make my own, honestly, because I think it could be so helpful. But what you guys are talking about, I can easily see like putting a rubric into it, like Yingzi. I don't know if you are familiar with the Visit or Michigan scales, and what we do is um, we have different categories. Like each row is we're looking at a different part of the student and their makeup, right? So one part is their acuity, one part is their fields, one part is how well they use their cane, one part is how much do they need to use their cane, and how well do they perform in O&M class. And so we grade those. Each row then has multiple columns for severity, and then we tally it up, and that's how we determine our direct service. But what I'm envisioning, as in my limited understanding of the programming of this, it would be something like that. You guys would develop almost a rubric for a severity of the environment, and in that way, I'm not saying that that's how you're going to do it. I'm just saying it could be that easy. Like, this is possible for all of our people, or all of our community members who are like, that's crazy, or that's really scary, or don't use AI very much. It really is possible for programmers to take our varying environments, for the researchers, for you guys to create a solid standardized rubric of like how difficult this task is and how difficult this environment is, and actually create a quantifiable number or information, whether it's a number or a summary or whatever that AI can do. And I think that that's really incredible that you guys are working on that, because AI isn't going away. We can't like sneeze because we're scared of it and it's just going to disappear. That's not how things are going to work. I think it's going to be more integrated into our lives than ever before as we move forward.
Cassie, I'm impressed by your understanding of the project, which is really, really great, comprehensive. And I think before all of that AI stuff, I am very open to AI as well. I think there are two things I found important in this context. Is I think, first of all, we try to do our research through collecting a lot of students' opinions, collecting all of experts' opinions. We try to identify some key features. For example, you are doing certain tasks, street crossing, for example. What are the key features in this environment that's truly important for this? I don't think AI will know that by itself, because AI can do a lot of things, quantify, like Joe said, noise level, how many people are walking, how fast are they, moving and cars, but it will never bypass the reality that it is the student and the therapist. You define what's important. And before Joe and I really jump into the AI world, like we are using smart glasses, we see a future there. But for now, we want to be very solid and really trying to answer this question from the patient function and from what's realistic for rehabilitation for clinical practice to define what's important before we throw in all sorts of AI models.
Yeah, and I want to just jump into a little bit what she was mentioning at all, and I think you raised a good point, Yingzi, that it's not at all to replace the O&M. It's actually the contrary. Is basically we know that O&Ms are overwhelmed, right? There's a lot to do, and it's really when it comes, it's not to the training, really. It's to like the note taking in a way that you can get more rich information than you can potentially remember, right, from what you were doing. And I look at always the way I've always looked at O&M is in the sense of kind of like with driving a car. You look at the cars now versus 20 years ago, okay? And then 20 years ago, I didn't have any camera that could even show me to go in reverse, much less all these blind spots, all these little gadgets that were going on. But despite that, there's not a reduction in the amount of driving instructors, right? Nothing is replacing that you have the driving instructor that has to go out there and teach them, right? And I don't think anybody's going to say, oh, well, just go ahead on the road. The car can do everything for you. Yeah, we talk about this, all the time, the self-driving cars and all of that. But there's an element to it of, are you willing to put your faith in the technology to do everything? Or do you need to have that baseline? And really what we're talking about in this project is just a technology that's like an add-on to enhance what the O&M can get, the type of data that they can get. And if they want to use it, fine. If they don't want to use it, fine. But then potentially then the governments at least could use it and say, look, this is the difference that you guys have been making without you having to make up all these reports and, do all this note taking. You say, I remember I can go through, I saw this person on this date. This was what the environment was like. This is the type of thing they were working on. And then this is their performance when they were doing it. And then I was working with that same person next time. And look, you can see how it was better the next time. So you can show, look, the impact of what I was doing, that this person got better, or the environment was much more complicated. Yeah, we started off on this little road here, but then you can see a few weeks later, now we were at this really busy intersection and was still able to do it on their own. So that's the idea. Is it's not at all, and I understand why people get scared of that. I have in my mind, there's no way that AI is going to replace O&Ms. I don't see any possibility of that, at least in my lifetime. It's really something that's too individualized, something that's too complex. It takes really well-trained people to offer that service, and it takes an O&M to offer those kind of services that we offer.
I agree. It makes me think about, Joe can relate to this. I'm sorry, Yingzi, that your background's different. So, but the first time as an O&M specialist that you give a student Google Maps, right? I was teaching at the coming of age of cell phones, when we started using them in our classes. And the first time I gave my student Google Maps, I don't know why, but I was expecting that Google Maps would just fix all their stuff. And needless to say, we were on the north side of a street going east, and we had to turn right to go south, right? Because the place that we're looking for is on the south side of the street, but we're on the north side of the street. And Google Maps told us to turn right in the middle of the block. And I was like, whoa, okay. Now that Google Maps has said this, what are you gonna do? Because we're not jaywalking. And then that's when I quickly realized that no matter how good our computers can get, that's not going to take away from, you're right, the baseline skills. There's a reason that we're still using a cane. There's a reason that we still have our model of one-on-one. We know in those instances what works and what's needed. And you're right, AI would never be able to fully take away the judgment call of the O&M specialists. And I think of, you're right, Yingzi, when you mention that there are key elements for some students that are big deal, but not a big deal for others. Like a crowded environment for one student could be exponentially hard, but a crowded environment for another student, breeze on by. They don't care. Whatever happens. And even though it's still a crowded environment, it's just, I wouldn't score it the same. So I get what you guys are sharing about there.
Yeah, and that's the other side of the formula, quote unquote formula. Joe and I try to use different terminology to describe all these systems, but exactly like you said, the same environment is different for every individual. So the other side of the thing we have to quantify or have a system for quantifying is the individual. It is so, Joe and I, we are writing this like sentence like today. What is disability? It's defined jointly by the person's capacity and the environment they try to function in. So really both ends are important to really define what's their function, what's the capacity of their function in that environment.
Well, that's all wonderful. All right. Would you guys like to share any last words about the study and how we can get involved? And do you need some help? Like, what can we do? We want to move this forward as a community. What do we do?
One of the things that I just wanted to bring up is, and I think Yingzi has mentioned this before, is we've reached out to O&Ms in the past, and we've had great responses from O&Ms in the past, and that's really why we wanted to reach out to you, Cassie, and reach out to other O&Ms, because really moving forward, what we need to understand is O&Ms have different realities of where they work, and thinking about things that maybe you measure in your practice, or maybe things that you wish you could measure, but you don't have the time for, or it's not practical based on where you work. We want to know a lot more about that. So we want to know, okay, look, I would like to say, for instance, okay, I would like to know about this person's walking speed. But look, there's no way for me to measure that because I have all of these other things that I have to do or I have to look out for. So we want to know kind of what you're out there measuring, as you just mentioned, Cassie, like some of the tools that you use to measure things. But then we also want to look at kind of like in the ideal environment, if you could, take note of everything, what are the things that are really important? Because I may have my perspective, Cassie, you'll have your perspective, but somebody that's working somewhere else in the world or some other environment, they may have a different perspective on it. So kind of know it. For building this kind of tool, we need to think about what are the critical things for an O&M to measure, whether it's the environment or whether it's about the person that they're working with. So that's one of the really important factors that we want to get out there, and we want to understand based on the different realities of different O&Ms.
And so how can we do that?
So Yingzi, do you want to share the website and the link?
Yeah, so we have sent a website to Cassie before this podcast. Hopefully Cassie will have a way to have our audiences access this link. So for now, basically we summarized many of the things Joe and I described. You may have questions, you may really wanted to argue with us because we didn't mention A, B, or C. So that will be your opportunity to really, put in your inputs. So it's going to be a survey. It's pretty brief. Joe and I know like everybody's busy, so we try to get to the point. So we ask you, what do you measure? Like Joe said, realistically, what do you often measure? What do you wish you could measure if you had minimal sessions with the patients? If you had the tool, you don't have to carry around all the time. What kind of environmental features you always want to pay attention to, even want to quantify? So we want to hear more opinions from O&M specialists who work with students in the field. And it's a Quadrex link. I think it's multiple choices. So it will be less demanding than open-ended questions. Yeah.
Perfect. So we will get that link and put it in the show notes below, wherever you're watching this, whether it be YouTube or the website or Spotify. The link is right below. So go definitely check it out and give them your opinion. And then the other thing is, if you are watching this and you are coming to the 2025 O&M Symposium, as we are recording this already, the presentation is up in the portal. I'm so excited to say that this YouTube video won't come out for at least another week or so. So it'll definitely be up and everybody will be in there by then. Make sure you go check it out because their presentation is incredible and it'll dive a little bit deeper into everything that we talked about, give you a little bit more of an understanding of the why and the what and the how and all of those questions that you might want to argue about. We don't actually have a very argumentative group within our allied little community here. We're pretty amenable. I mean, we're allowed to disagree, about some things. But anyway, go check that out. And there is a CEU available for you for that. Well, I just want to thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast, sharing a little bit about yourselves. I know, Joe, I didn't ask you about your background much. I'm sorry, but Joe has been on podcast before. I'm sorry. Now that we're wrapping this up, I feel really rude. Like, oh, we never circled back to Joe. I'm so sorry. But Joe has been on the podcast before, and he's an active member within our community, presents at our
He's already famous,
symposiums, especially when he has really exciting projects
Cassie's heard
going
enough
on.
about me.
We're so happy to support you, and we're so happy to receive all of your support and that your research does, you guys. Thank you so much for caring about this tiny niche of a field. I just really can't share with you how much I appreciate all the work that both of you guys are doing for all of our O&Ms, for the field as a whole, and for the people with visual impairments that this ultimately affects. Because for us, we love our jobs, but it isn't our independence, it's theirs. So that's really who we're all working for, right? Okay, let's wrap up. I'd love for each of you guys to give our community one piece of advice to help them take a step forward in being better O&Ms this year. What would you say that would be?
I would say to be better O&Ms, I would say be tolerant. I can say here in Canada, because the weather is not always very amenable. So I would say be tolerant, because standing out at the street corner in 0 degrees weather is tough. So be as tolerant as possible, and I think that goes along with being flexible, because sometimes you got to change things up last minute too.
And I don't think it's my place to teach you guys how to be better O&Ms. But what I can say is I really hope there are more O&Ms who are more open to be involved in research. So that can start from sharing your perspectives on the research, telling us what is really needed, what is really practical. And two, if you want to be like an active collaborator, really help us developing protocols like what Joe and I are doing, are essentially trying to reach out to more people to hear their advice. And we would love to have more people like who want to have a Zoom call with us and talk more in depth into how to do better O&M research for what we are doing. So I think that is my hope. I really hope to be friends with more O&M specialists.
Well, you are welcome into our group. I'm holding out my arms like I'm hugging you, even though I'm just the internet is weird. No, but for real, like so when I think about your invitation there, I think about somebody like me who has so many questions, and I'd love to have the answers to how does this actually work, or what are the numbers for other people's caseloads, or other people seeing, the same thing. I want my ideas quantified now, and I've just never known how do you even do that? But the fact that we now have this contact and we can reach out to you, that's really great. Thank you so much for even opening your calendar to take a meeting and to look at what is needed in O&M, because we don't have very many, big research names. Joe does a fantastic job. Our universities do a fantastic job, but it's the fact that it's stepped beyond our silos is incredible. And hopefully we can keep that momentum going, because I really think that research is needed in our field. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast. I can't wait to get this out to our community, and I really appreciate getting to chat with you.
Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much, Cassie.